Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that your mind is tuned to a completely new frequency, one that makes achieving your goals effortless. What if you could convince your mind to think in a way that aligns perfectly with your dreams, making anything you desire not just a possibility, but a reality? So, we're going to explore how you can convince your mind to think like this, to achieve anything using principles based on my teachings and research. The journey begins with understanding that the hardest part of transforming your life is making the time and effort to do it. It's not just about setting aside moments in your day. It's about dedicating yourself to a new way of being. You need to carve out time when you wake up in the morning or before you go to bed at night. During these times, ask yourself, what is the greatest version of myself that I want to be today? Visualize this ideal self and commit to embodying it. When you start this process, you're likely to encounter resistance. This resistance comes from your existing habits, your limitations, and your old self. This is where most people get stuck. They want change, but they struggle to make it happen because they haven't fully engaged with their limitations. Overcoming these limitations requires a deep commitment to your transformation. Self-love is often misunderstood. Many people think self-love means indulging in pleasures like buying a new car or getting a manicure. But true self-love is much deeper. It's about sitting with yourself and working on overcoming your deep-seated thoughts and beliefs. It's about addressing the emotional patterns that have been shaped by your past. When you face your pain and fear, you are actually stretching yourself beyond your current limitations. On the other side of this struggle is freedom. Beyond fear lies courage, and beyond sadness lies joy. This joy is a natural byproduct of breaking free from emotional addictions and past conditioning. When you start to stretch past these limitations, you'll notice a shift. You'll feel liberated, and this newfound energy will allow you to create more effectively. As you free yourself from old patterns, you begin to respect and love yourself more deeply. This self-respect naturally extends to others. You'll see yourself in others and approach them with greater compassion. This change in how you relate to others is a reflection of the change within yourself. Now, imagine starting your day by immersing yourself in this new state of being. If you can make it a point not to get up until you are fully embodying this new version of yourself, you will have set a powerful intention. By doing this consistently, you are rewiring your brain and conditioning your body to align with this new state. Your body, which is essentially your unconscious mind, begins to live in this future reality in the present moment. When your mind and body work together in this state, you'll notice that you have more energy by the end of the day than when you began. In Tibetan, the word for meditation translates to become familiar with. This idea gives us a deeper understanding of what meditation truly involves. It's not just about sitting quietly or focusing your mind. It's about getting to know yourself on a very intimate level. When you meditate, you are actually spending time with yourself in a very personal way. You're not just observing what's happening around you, but you're also diving into your inner world. This means becoming aware of your thoughts, your habits, and your emotions, especially those that you don't usually pay much attention to. These are the unconscious aspects of yourself that often drive your behavior without you even realizing it. Imagine your mind as a vast landscape. Most people are so busy with their daily lives that they rarely explore this inner terrain. Meditation is like setting aside time to explore this landscape in detail. You start to notice the hidden paths, the overgrown areas, and the patterns that have been there for a long time. By doing this, you become familiar with the different parts of your mind and how they affect you. When you become familiar with these aspects of yourself, you start to understand why you think and feel the way you do. For example, you might realize that certain thoughts or emotions keep repeating themselves in your life. Maybe you have a habit of feeling anxious in social situations or a tendency to procrastinate on important tasks. By becoming aware of these patterns, you can start to change them. This process of becoming familiar with yourself helps reduce the chance of falling back into old habits. When you are not aware of your unconscious patterns, you can easily slip back into old ways of thinking and behaving. But when you regularly meditate and pay attention to your inner world, you create a stronger awareness of these patterns. This awareness helps you make more conscious choices and avoid reverting to old patterns. The key is consistency. Meditation is not a one-time thing, but a practice that needs to be done regularly. The more you practice, the more familiar you become with your thoughts, habits, and emotions. Over time, you start to know yourself on a deeper level. You begin to understand what drives your behavior and how to manage it more effectively. As you continue to meditate and become more familiar with your inner self, you also start to create a new identity for yourself. This is where the neurological and emotional aspects come into play. When you meditate, you are not just thinking about who you want to be. You are also wiring your brain to support this new identity. Here's how it works. When you repeatedly focus on a new way of being, you are creating new neural pathways in your brain. These are like new routes or roads that your brain can take. The more you practice, the stronger these new pathways become. Your brain starts to rely on these new routes instead of the old ones, making it easier for you to think and act in new ways. Emotionally, you are also conditioning your body to align with this new identity. When you focus on new thoughts and behaviors during meditation, you are also generating new emotions. For example, if you are working on becoming more confident, your meditative practice might involve feeling and experiencing confidence in a very real way. Your body starts to associate these new emotions with your new identity, making it more natural for you to act confidently in real life. This practice of becoming familiar with your new self has a powerful effect. As you keep working on it, the new identity you are building becomes more ingrained in who you are. You start to notice changes in how you think and feel. Your behavior begins to align more closely with this new self, and you find that it's easier to maintain these new patterns in your daily life. Remember, a new state of being equates to a new personality, and a new personality leads to a new personal reality. This is why it's crucial to make a firm decision to change. If you're committed to transforming your life, you must make this decision with intention and resolve. No one else can make this change for you. It has to come from within. The process of change involves shifting from the old self to the new self. You are not stuck with your past habits and behaviors. Research in neuroplasticity shows that our brains are not hardwired to be a certain way forever. Similarly, epigenetics research reveals that we are not doomed by our genes. We are capable of adaptation and change. This means that you have the power to change your brain and body through consistent practice. When you begin to contemplate who you want to be, your brain starts to create a new reality. Your frontal lobe, which is connected to the entire neocortex, begins to search for solutions and new possibilities. It activates different networks of neurons relevant to your desired state. This is where intention plays a critical role. As you learn and grow, your brain forms new connections and raw materials for imagining your new self. Mental rehearsal is a crucial tool for changing your life. Think of it like practice for your mind. Just like athletes practice their skills to get better, mental rehearsal helps you practice being the person you want to become. It's a way to prepare your brain for future success. When you mentally rehearse your desired life, you are essentially training your brain to think and act as if that life has already happened. Imagine you want to be more confident and successful. Through mental rehearsal, you visualize yourself in situations where you are confident and successful. You see yourself acting and feeling the way you want to. This process does more than just help you imagine your future. It actually changes how your brain works. When you repeatedly practice these mental images, you are installing new neurological pathways in your brain. Think of your brain like a computer. Right now, it might be running old programs that reflect past experiences and habits. Mental rehearsal helps you install new software that aligns with the future you want. Here's how it works. When you visualize yourself succeeding, your brain starts to create new connections between neurons. Neurons are like tiny messengers in your brain that communicate with each other. When you practice mental rehearsal, these neurons start forming new connections that support your desired behaviors and feelings. Over time, these connections become stronger, just like how muscle memory works when you practice a sport or a musical instrument. As you continue with mental rehearsal, these new connections in your brain become a well-established network. This network acts like a map that guides your actions and decisions towards your goals. Instead of being a record of past habits and experiences, your brain starts to operate based on the new patterns you've practiced. With enough repetition, this new neurological hardware becomes a software program. This means your brain starts to automatically think, act, and feel like the person you are training to be. For example, if you are practicing being confident, your brain will start to default to confidence in real-life situations. You won't need to consciously remind yourself to be confident. It will come naturally because your brain has been trained to act this way. This transformation is gradual. At first, you might need to put in a lot of effort to visualize and rehearse, but as you keep practicing, the new patterns become easier and more automatic. The more you rehearse, the more your brain adapts to these new ways of thinking and behaving. Eventually, the person you want to become will start to feel like your true self. Think of mental rehearsal like a rehearsal for a play. Actors practice their lines and actions over and over until they can perform them naturally on stage. Similarly, when you rehearse the life you want, you are practicing how to act and think in your daily life. Just like actors become their roles through practice, you become the person you want to be through mental rehearsal. In practical terms, you can use mental rehearsal to achieve specific goals. Let's say you want to improve your public speaking skills. You can spend a few minutes each day visualizing yourself giving a successful speech. Picture yourself speaking confidently, engaging with your audience, and handling any challenges that come up. Feel the emotions of success and accomplishment. Over time, this practice helps you build the confidence and skills you need in real life. Mental rehearsal is not just about visualizing success, it's also about feeling the emotions associated with your goals. Emotions play a big role in how our brains work. When you mentally rehearse, you are not only creating new thought patterns, but also conditioning your body to feel the emotions of success. This combination of thoughts and feelings helps to reinforce the new neural pathways in your brain. A significant aspect of this transformation is to not wait for external circumstances to change before you feel the emotions you desire. Instead, start feeling gratitude, empowerment, and love before your desires manifest. Your body, which functions as your unconscious mind, does not distinguish between actual experiences and imagined experiences. By creating these emotions through thought alone, your body believes it is living in a future reality. The stronger the emotion you generate, the more your mind and body align with your new reality. My own research into neuroscience and meditation has shown that when you truly immerse yourself in the present moment, you lose track of time and space. This state of pure consciousness allows you to connect with the broader consciousness of the universe. When you are in this state, you are no longer defined by your past, your environment, or your identity. You become a pure consciousness, open to endless possibilities. To achieve anything, you must get beyond your old self, your environment, and the limitations of linear time. When you transcend these boundaries, you connect with a higher level of consciousness. This expanded state of awareness is where real transformation occurs. By continuously practicing these principles, you align your mind and body with your highest aspirations, making it possible to achieve anything you set your sights on. Convincing your mind to think in a new way is not just about positive thinking. It involves a deep commitment to transforming your habits, beliefs, and emotions. And accepted that there was an intelligence that lived within them that was giving them life. And then these people you interviewed who had had injuries that overcame. No, these are people were with cancer, MS, Lou. This Parkinson's disease got better. Yeah, just spontaneously, it's called a spontaneous for you. I believe there was an intelligence, there was some invisible life force they were connected to that. They felt like they had lost their connection till they became separate and disconnected from. And that when they got the diagnosis, they woke up and said, man, I got to connect again, and I got to connect to my essence. And so they developed a relationship with it. Just like you develop a relationship with anybody, it takes time. You got to be present. You got to connect. You got to experience. You got to be present. All of these things are important elements. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that they realized that it was the mismanagement of their emotions and the hormones of stress that really began to create their condition. Now stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance. The stress is when your body's not that of homeostasis. We have an innate mechanism in our body that returns us back to order. So then if someone cuts you off on the LA freeway, you have an emotional reaction, but 15 minutes later, you're back to driving and you're over it, right? That's all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. Everyone's all day long, all week, all year. Yeah, so if you're reacting to like a Tyrannosaurus, Rex is chasing you, you have to make a decision. Am I going to use 20% of my energy? I'm going to use 100%. So it turns out when you're reacting to traffic 200%, all right, after reacting to your coworker sitting in the cubicle next to you, you're turning on that response, and what was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive. Because when you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off now, you're headed for disease because nobody can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. Well, human beings, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. You can think about your problems and you're producing the same biological effects. So those chemicals give the brain and body a rush of energy, and people become addicted to that rush of energy. So now they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. They need the bad job. They need the poor relationship. So that means they become addicted to the life that they don't even like. Why do we need the bad job or bad relationship and stay stuck? Because it's a conditioned response. So listen, if you get angry at a coworker and all of a sudden you get arousal in your brain and body, right? You get a rush of energy. When you start noticing that your body starts dropping, your brain starts noticing your energy starts dropping, you're automatically going to have the image of the coworker in order to give your body the jolt. Right? So all of a sudden people become addicted to their own thoughts, right? So these people realize that, oh my God, I've been mismanaging my attention and energy, and I got it. I got to get beyond my past. I got to get beyond these emotions. I got to make some big changes. I got to break the habit of being myself. I got to stop being this person. Now that sounds really good theoretically and philosophically, but change is such a hard thing. All right, because the moment you come back to your senses and you step back into your life and you see that person or you go to that place or you're with that experience, so many people are unconsciously reacting in their thoughts and feelings to everything in their environment. So now their environment is controlling how they think and feel. So they realize that in order to change, they've got to be greater than their environment, greater than the conditions in the world, greater than the circumstances in life. Be mindful of that every time it comes up, to be like, okay, I'm going to think differently. I'm not going to react this way. I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go back, because the moment you start reacting emotionally, emotions are a record of the past. And if those emotions are driving your thoughts, you're thinking in the past. And if you can't think greater than how you feel, and you believe your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, you're creating more of your past, right? So it turns out that the repetition of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking, these loops that people get caught in, condition their body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion, which means now their unconscious mind is believing they're living in the same past experience, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I kind of move past the word visualization because I think it kind of conjures up a little bit too much of a spiritual association. The word that's used in science is called mental rehearsal. In mental rehearsal, there's two types of mental rehearsal. There's what's called internal mental imaging, which means you're in the scene as the first person experiencing it. And then there's called external mental imaging, which is you're observing yourself in the scene. Turns out that when you are actually in the first person and not the third person, that action of rehearsing what you're doing produces the strong biological change. Now let's talk about this. You can take a group of people that have never played the piano before, and you can do a functional brain scan on them, and then you can teach them one-handed scales and chords, and they'll practice those chords 2 hours a day for 5 days. At the end of 5 days, they grow a whole new set of circuits on the opposite side of the brain. Well, that makes sense. You learn something new. Learning is making new synaptic connections. You get your body involved with some instruction. When you get your body involved, you're going to have a new experience. Experience enriches the brain. You pay attention to what you're doing. You've got to pay attention and stay present. And if you repeat it over and over again, firing and wiring, you assemble new networks of neurons equal to your experience. Nothing new there, but you can take a group of people and you can have them close their eyes. Do a brain scan on them before the experiment. 5 days later, do a brain scan after. And for 2 hours a day, they mentally rehearse playing those scales and chords. At the end of 5 days, they grow the same amount of circuits in their brain as the people actually physically doing the exercise. So what's the relevance? Number one, when you're truly focused and you're truly paying attention, your brain does not know the difference between what's going on out there and what's going on in here. So the thought becomes the experience, and the brain looks like it's been playing the piano for the last 5 days, but they never lift a finger. Now, from a biological standpoint, our brains are a record of the past. They're an artifact of everything we've learned and experienced to this moment. When we prime the brain to change its circuitry before the experience, now the brain is no longer a record of the past. It's now a map to the future. And so as we warm up those brain circuits, it's more easy for us to slip into a supernatural behavior. If you take those people and you set them from the piano, and they've never played the piano before, but they've been mentally rehearsing for the last 5 days, they'll play those scales and chords like magic. They just learned how to do it just by changing their internal state. Take a group of men. You can have them close their eyes and for an hour a day, mentally rehearse doing bicep curls over and over again, and they add an emotional component called harder, stronger, more intense, and they put themselves in that first-person internal mental image. At the end of 2 weeks, they have a 13.5 increase in muscle strength, and they've never performed the activity. Not only is the brain changed to look like the experience has already occurred, now the body has changed by thought alone. The body looks like it's been working out for the last 2 weeks. So then the power of mental rehearsal, of imaging primes, the brain and body to look like the future has already occurred. And when you set the extent of your limit, and then they said, let's take a control group, just a group of people that are just average people, and we'll use the monks, and we'll teach them how to do this thing called focused concentration, what science is now called paying attention. By the way, the average human being loses their attention span 6 to 10 times a minute. That's why only a few subatomic particles actually pay attention to our mind. So he said, okay, we're going to hook these guys up to these brain scans, particular ones called EEGs. And EEGs measure electromagnetic frequency that the brain emits. And so they took 256 electrodes and they covered their whole entire head. Can you picture these monks with the things? And then they ran all the feedback into a computer that created a holographic picture of the brain, and they were able to begin to measure brain activity. They said to these monks, "Be your normal self." They took 8 of them. Be your normal self. And then they said, okay, now listen, you guys, pay attention to compassion. Just close your eyes and pay attention to compassion. The moment they did that, all of a sudden, the frontal lobe lit up so much that the scientists had never seen that type of activity in that part of the brain. Now, then they took the control group and they said, all right, you guys, pay attention to one thing. And of course, what happened? My back hurts. How long is this going to take? I don't really want to do this. Am I doing it right? I wonder what my kid's doing. I gotta buy dinner, all that stuff. And guess what happened to their frontal lobe? Meh, nothing. Now, in one particular monk, there's a part of the frontal lobe on the left side, which is really the happy spot in the brain. And this guy's left frontal lobe was so ignited that the scientists said, this guy's gotta be the happiest guy in the world. They'd never seen activity like this before. But then the scientists began to think about this, and what they said was, maybe paying attention and concentration and observation is a skill, just like tennis or golf. And you can improve it if you keep practicing it. Now think about this. The brain is the instrument that we use. It's the machinery for us to process thought. How many people accept that? And it also has some automatic processes that allow us to function. But for the most part, it's the greatest area in the body where there's the greatest number of neurons clustered together. And where you have the greatest number of neurons clustered together, you have the greatest intelligence. So the brain is the central clearinghouse of intelligence. Mind, by the way, is what the brain does. Mind is the brain in action. It's the brain at work. When we can measure a working brain, we're studying mind. So mind is when the brain is in action. So when we're using functional brain scans and we're studying how the brain works, we're studying this concept called mind. Then here's my question. If the brain is the instrument for intelligence or processing thought, and mind is what the brain does, if you can improve the way your brain works, who's doing the improving? And it's that nasty 13-letter word called consciousness. That's the only solution. Consciousnesses are self-aware, free-willed individual that is really not the body, is not the brain, and is not the mind. As a matter of fact, consciousness is what manipulates the brain to produce mind. The brain processes 400 billion bits of information every second, but we're only aware of about 2,000 of those 400 billion bits of information. And you know what those 2,000 bits of information have to do with? 3 things, and only 3 things: the body, the environment, and time. That's it. Does your back hurt? Do you have a headache? Are you tired? Is it too cold in here? Is it too bright in here? Is it too dark in here? Do you like the way the person smells sitting next to you? Do you even like the person next to you? How long's this guy gonna talk before we can break? And that's where all of our self-awareness is on. It's only on the body, the environment, and time. And yet billions of bits of information is being processed by the brain. Now, when we can take consciousness, self-awareness, and move it away from the body, the environment, and time, we no longer have to live by the laws of the body, the environment, and time. And when we're able to do that, we begin to open the door to walk into the quantum field. So then the first step to change is becoming conscious of those unconscious states of mind and body. Most people don't like to do this. Everybody knows this, that you keep switching on that system for an extended period of time, and you live by the arousal of fear, the arousal of pain, the arousal of suffering, the arousal of aggression. It takes energy to activate those latent systems. And when we do that, our immune system is compromised. The energy that's mobilized for emergency, for the threat in the outer environment, compromises the energy in our inner environment, and we are then more susceptible to the conditions in our outer environment. And as Greg said, you have to look at to see what keeps you in balance. And stress and living in survival is when you're not that balanced, not that homeostasis. We can tolerate that short term, but if you keep exposing yourself to the same stimulation, or you have a thought of some worst-case scenario in your mind, you're actually knocking your brain and body out of balance by thought alone. And this is where it gets dangerous, because the conditioning response, the worst-case scenario, the image we create in our mind, and the emotion that we perceive is the stimulus response that's conditioning the body to subconsciously live by the arousal of fear, as an example. So that internal environment becomes compromised and the immune system dials down. And why is that? Because we are more reactionary or responding more to the environment. So, and Greg, you know this, that in a time like this, when everybody's feeling fear, that seems natural and normal. But what we're looking for is supernatural. And that's the new consciousness that has to emerge as a result of this wake-up call. This is a perfect opportunity for people to be in a retreat, but instead of being in some tent or some hut in the Himalayas, or being in some hotel, you're in the comfort of your own home. And it's true, you break from routine, and you're not going to the same place, and seeing the same people and doing the same thing. And that causes you to step outside of familiar territory. So then when we practice the inward work, when we practice meditation, as an example, and you have the ability to take a moment and be present and truly open your heart, our research shows that you are going to actually create a state of information that's no longer coming from your outer world, that there's danger in there. But when you start falling into the present moment and opening your heart, your immune system in 4 days can strengthen by 50%. Now, I know most people will say, I don't really want to do it now, it's just too hard. No. This is the time. This is the time that we've been practicing for. This is the time where it matters the most.